The person you learned the most from last year probably earned less than the person who repackaged their ideas into a $12 ebook. That gap between expertise and income is one of the most quietly frustrating problems smart people face. And the advice you keep hearing about how to close it, build a personal brand, create a course, start a newsletter, tends to skip the part where most of those strategies feel like slowly becoming someone you'd unfollow. So here's what actually works when you want to earn from what you know, without waking up one morning unable to recognize your own voice. The default path looks something like this. You're good at something. Someone suggests you teach it online. You look at the people already doing that and notice they've turned their expertise into a performance. Thumbnails with shocked faces, captions that promise secrets, content calendars that run their lives. You think, there has to be another way. There is, but finding it requires understanding why the loud path became the default in the first place. Platforms reward consistency and volume. Algorithms favor people who post daily, who optimize every headline, who treat their knowledge like content inventory to be moved off shelves. The people winning that game aren't necessarily the most knowledgeable. They're the most willing to compress their ideas into formats that trigger clicks, and because they're the most visible, they become the model everyone copies. The quiet expert with 20 years of depth looks at this landscape and feels a specific kind of nausea. That nausea is actually useful data. It's telling you the volume game requires trading depth for frequency. And depth is your actual advantage. The first shift that changes everything is understanding who you're really selling to. Most monetization advice assumes you're building for a mass audience, thousands of followers, viral reach, wide funnel. But expertise doesn't scale the same way entertainment does. A comedian needs millions of viewers. An expert in, say, commercial real estate tax strategy needs 40% of the right people. The math works differently when your knowledge solves expensive problems. One client paying $5,000 requires a fraction of the audience that $10,000 $2 purchases demand. And reaching that one client requires credibility, which is the opposite of what most content strategies build. Credibility compounds quietly. A well-placed article in an industry publication, a talk at a conference where decision-makers sit in the audience, a referral from someone whose judgment the buyer already trusts. These channels are boring by internet standards. They're also where high-value expertise actually gets purchased. So what does this look like in practice? Pick the version of monetization that matches your tolerance for visibility, because there are more options than the internet suggests. Consulting is the most direct path. You trade hours for money, but at rates that reflect specialized knowledge rather than generic labor. The ceiling is your calendar. The floor is your reputation. A tax attorney who consults on cross-border structures can charge $800 an hour because the alternative is her client losing tens of thousands to a misstructured deal. She doesn't need an Instagram following. She needs 4 LinkedIn posts a year that demonstrate she understands the latest regulatory changes better than the client's in-house team. Advisory work sits one level above consulting. You're compensated for judgment rather than execution. Monthly retainers, equity stakes, board seats. The hours are fewer. The leverage is higher. Getting here usually requires a track record in consulting first, because advisory clients are buying proof that your pattern recognition works under pressure. Then there's productized expertise, courses, templates, frameworks, written guides. This is where most people start because the internet makes it look easy. Someone packages their knowledge into a course, launches it, and screenshots the revenue. What you don't see is the 18 months of audience building that preceded the launch, or the fact that the course revenue often plateaus after the initial burst unless you keep feeding the marketing machine. The productized path works best as a complement to higher touch work. You consult with clients, notice the same questions appearing repeatedly, and turn those answers into a resource that handles the repetitive layer. The course or guide becomes a filter. People who consume it and want more become consulting clients. People who only needed the basics got what they paid for. Both sides win. You didn't have to dance on camera. Writing is the most underrated monetization channel for experts. A well-argued piece that circulates within your industry does more for your pipeline than 6 months of social media posts. The shelf life is longer, the signal-to-noise ratio is better, and the people who find you through your writing have already self-selected as the kind of audience that values depth. Paid newsletters work here too, but with a caveat. A newsletter monetizes attention. If maintaining the publication schedule starts compromising the quality of your thinking, you've just built a different kind of treadmill. One approach that rarely gets discussed is licensing your frameworks to organizations. If you've developed a methodology, a diagnostic process, an assessment tool, a decision-making framework, companies will pay to use it internally. You train their teams once, license the intellectual property, and collect recurring revenue without recurring effort. This requires your framework to actually work, which is why it filters for genuine expertise rather than a performative authority. Speaking engagements are another path, but they split into two very different economies. Free talks at industry events are marketing. Paid keynotes at corporate conferences are revenue. The bridge between them is a body of work that event organizers can point to when justifying your fee to their budget committee. A book helps here. So does a portfolio of case studies showing measurable outcomes from your advice. The speaking circuit rewards specificity. Leadership expert gets you ignored. The person who helped 3 Fortune 500 companies cut executive turnover by a third gets you booked. Now, critics of this approach will say something reasonable. They'll say the loud path works, that the people posting daily reels and optimizing their funnels are making real money. And that's true. Some of them are making more money than the quiet expert ever will. The question is whether you're optimizing for maximum revenue or for a sustainable practice that lets you keep liking your own work. Those goals overlap. Sometimes they diverge more often than the hustle crowd admits. A consultant earning $300,000 a year with 12 clients and no social media presence might be wealthier in every dimension that matters than the influencer earning $500,000 while managing a team of 5 filming daily and answering to an algorithm's mood swings. The trap most experts fall into is thinking they need to choose one channel and go all in. The more resilient model stacks 2 or 3 that feed each other. Consulting generates case studies. Case studies fuel writing. Writing attracts speaking invitations. Speaking creates consulting leads. Each channel reinforces the others without requiring you to become a full-time content creator. The key is that every channel draws from the same well, your actual expertise, rather than requiring you to manufacture a separate media personality. There's a practical test for whether you're on the right path. Ask yourself this: does the way I'm earning require me to know more over time or to perform more over time? If the answer is perform, you've drifted into entertainment. Entertainment pays well, but eats expertise alive, because the hours you spend on production are hours you're not spending on getting better at the thing that made you worth listening to in the first place. The experts who sustain careers over decades protect their learning time like it's revenue, because it is. Every hour you spend going deeper is an hour that makes next year's consulting more valuable, next year's framework sharper, next year's writing more precise. The version of monetization that doesn't cost you your integrity looks boring from the outside. Fewer followers, fewer launches, fewer screenshots of payment notifications. What it looks like from the inside is different. It looks like Tuesday afternoon and you're reading a research paper because it's relevant to a client problem and you realize you're enjoying yourself. It looks like a reputation that precedes you into rooms you never had to beg to enter. It looks like raising your rates because demand outstripped your calendar, and the demand came from the work itself. Your expertise already has a market. The question was never whether people will pay for what you know. The question is whether you'll package it in a way that lets you keep becoming the person who knows it.